Now, Amos, there's one thing which came up at the COP. For the first time, we had a pavilion on children and the youth at the COP. This at least we saw something different this time around.
Yes.
Do you think this is a good move, maybe looking at the next generation when it comes to the effect of climate?
Yeah, the thing is, and I'll go back a little bit on whether we still need COPs or not.
Yes.
The thing is, a global challenge of the magnitude of the climate crisis cannot be solved by an individual country. We need global solidarity. We need efforts at all levels, from local level, having these community resilient programs to a global level decisions. The problem is that Africa hasn't internalized that climate negotiations are political, highly political. We are still sending our ministers for environment when other countries are sending their foreign affairs ministers who understand foreign policy.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's where we fail, because in these discussions we dwell very much on ecology, but I think climate discussions are socio-political. We need to really present our interests, like Dan clearly puts. Africa will need close to $3.8 trillion to be able to develop systems that would enable it to be resilient, energy systems. Actually, the 100 billion that was promised was not based on any assessment, leave alone that they have not delivered. So the thing is, Africa needs to identify its own interests. Africa needs to develop its own development model that it needs to follow and become our leader. We are lucky that we have the best resources. Talk about critical minerals that are needed to develop technologies for renewables are in Africa. But the problem is we are used to exporting low value raw materials and importing back high value. And that's what keeps Africa in a cyclic dependence and poverty. We are not poor. It's only that we have not established our power to participate in the full value chain of our resources. Why would Nigeria export crude oil and import refined oil, for example? So those are the things that we need to be addressing internally, but also as we get into these spaces, we need to articulate our interests clearly. And for Africa to be able to deal with the crisis, the climate crisis, it will need three things. One, Africa will need to demand the climate debt owed to it by historical polluters. Because we are talking about developing our energy systems. That will need investments. We do not have that money. That money will have to come from somewhere. And what has been happening recently is that we are having initiatives that are bringing money on the continent, but mostly in terms of loans, which is problematic. Sovereign loans, commercial loans, they are very problematic because they attract high interest. What is needed is financing facilities that will not overburden Africa with debts as Africa develops systems of the future, as Africa develops systems that would help it deal with the crisis that it's presented with. Number two, we will need technological transfer. We have resources, yes, we do not have the technology. We will need that technological transfer, and this will need cooperation and partnerships with countries that own these technologies. And what we've been calling for is we should not have another COVID vaccine apartheid. That the important technologies that will help Africa transition, that will help Africa build renewable systems, have to be open source. They have to be openly available. We should not be having intellectual properties on critical, necessary technologies that will help us fix the climate challenge. Because what that does is disadvantages countries that do not have the financial muscle.
Yeah.
Number 3, Africa will need capacity building and skills development. That through this partnership that we are going to be negotiating and the cooperations between the North and the South, our people need to be skilled so that we do not just export raw materials, but they participate fully in the value chain. Today, if you ask people to participate fully in green hydrogen, for example, economy, do we have those skills? We do not have. So we will need capacity building on the continent. So those are the things that when we get into these spaces, we should be demanding for. That you owe us climate debt. You can repay that through technology transfer, through making available enough funds, not just those pledges that are made out of no assessment, funds based on available data. Then you will need to help us skill our people.
Wow. Actually, on green hydrogen, the president spoke about it during the COP in his speech. You can just briefly mention about it, the green hydrogen in Kenya and what that means.
Yeah, what has been happening across the continent is that there has already been discussions. And there are two things here. Green hydrogen can either help Africa roll out renewables on a large scale and very quickly, and for a country like Kenya, it can help us stabilize our grid system. We can store excess power generated from renewables in a hydrogen molecule that can be used later when there is peak demand. So Kenya is planning, is part of the initial 10 African countries that have formed the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance. The intention of the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance is to consolidate African capacities and efforts in developing a green hydrogen economy on the continent. Namibia already signing agreements, Mauritania, but Kenya has not entered into any agreement yet, but we are part of the alliance. The reason is that Kenya wants to use its excess power to store in a hydrogen molecule. The good thing about Kenya is not for export. Because if green hydrogen is going to be built on an export-oriented model, then what we are doing is we have just found another way of exporting our renewables, like we did with oil and gas, which is problematic. We need to build green hydrogen economy to benefit Africa. The Sahel, huge potential for solar that can power the whole continent and share with the world. We have huge potential for wind. We have huge potential for hydro. We have huge potential for geothermal here in Africa, Kenya. So we have the critical minerals needed to develop the technologies. We have a youthful population that is very vibrant. Africa has all these opportunities and capacities. What is stopping us is leadership. Now, the change in Africa will not happen unilaterally. It will come from all directions. And that's why it was exciting that we had a pavilion for the youth and children. Our youth have been very active in pushing out the climate agenda. Elizabeth Watuti, Vanessa, Fridays for the Future.
The young guy.
Iman.
And from here in Eastlands.
So there are so many useful people, and they are doing amazing work. They are mobilizing. They are planting trees. They are having conversations. They are reminding the political leadership of their responsibilities. But we also have the civil society. It's unfortunate that Omar has left. Omar is convening an Africa climate movement space that is bringing together feminists, faith leaders, farmers, everyone, energy experts into one tent to develop a model that is fit for purpose for Africa. And I think these efforts from civil society, from youth groups, if they can be complemented with African institutional arrangements, like the Africa Group of Negotiators, the AMSETs, I think Africa can get into these international debates, these international discussions, these international spaces with a strong common position that can help it come out of these discussions with something to take home.
Wow. Now, I think this discussion on environment, we can talk about the whole day, the whole night, because you guys are passionate about it, and you found someone else who is passionate about it. That is myself. Sorry to brag about it, but this is where we are. This is our work. But as we wind up, maybe Wanjuki, you can briefly tell us now. He spoke about green hydrogen. You can just, because being a scientist, science was not a subject for everyone in school. And that is why some of us, we are behind the microphones, because you could not do it. Now you can just briefly break it down for us and tell us what could this mean for the nation of Kenya. Of course, he has mentioned something, but maybe you can add something to it before we call it a day.
The interesting part is that the patent for making hydrogen from water using electricity is under my name. I actually did a patent in 2010 for generation of hydrogen on board your vehicle, and I was actually, it was in the newspaper on the 22nd of February 2010, the Nation newspaper, and it said, oh, you can drive your vehicle with literally no fuel. When I did that, and the patent actually is in my name, but I also had co-opted someone in America just to look bigger. And then the government didn't take an interest.
Wow.
I took it to several offices. The last one is when I was told, the one that broke my spirit completely is when I was told, Kenya has just discovered Gamia 2. There's no way you can bring the story of us doing hydrogen.
Hydrogen, yes.
Let us, first of all,
do the fuel.
Join the League of Oil Producing Countries. Actually, the word was, we have just joined the League of Oil Producing Countries. You cannot now bring the story of hydrogen. Other countries have taken that technology, like now you can get hydrogen hybrid vehicles. But the patent is at the Kenya Intellectual Property Office. I have tried to go out, but like you said, and many of my technologies, actually my innovations, they are not, don't wrap it in a patent and it's just say, oh, I'm the one. I normally publish it and make it free. If Kenya would want to do hydrogen fuel, okay, like solar during the day, you use that, make manufacture hydrogen, separate hydrogen and oxygen, use oxygen for medical purpose, but the hydrogen is meant for, you can constitute it as in a way of generating electricity, not the fuel cell that requires a lot of technology to manufacture, but it basically just burn it like fuel. You just burn it. In my vehicle, I would burn fuel back into hydrogen, back into water. And actually the name of the patent was the Rainmaker. I was making rain by driving my Land Rover. It generates steam at the back, not steam, actually droplets that can actually... This is a technology that is in Kenya, but the wiring is that nothing comes from the south. And if it comes, because I've had a conversation with high-level officials at UNEP, but it didn't seem to sit well. How did it happen that you have this kind of... and
you saw it ahead.
The way we treat our technologists is that if he claimed that he was the owner of a technology, the first thing would be to go asking everybody around this room, is this really his or is it yours? Is it yours? Or is it his? Yeah. So like mtoto amezaliwa Pamwani, the first, instead of assigning the name to the lady who is holding the baby, first of all go asking everybody around whether that could be their children. their baby. That's the technology. That's how we do ourselves. If I've done several patents, up to 7, but many of them are not matured, because you do it and then they're still looking around the world to see whether it could have been stolen from somewhere, and so you could be you are viewed as a pirate. So what do? Next time you don't even publish it. So the technology on hydrogen fuel, which we can actually roll out. I have actually recruited some people in Eurocaral who can do the hydrogen fuel. Someone just came and said he wanted. I gave him the technology on how to generate, to make this equipment. I have a few workshops that can do that. But where's the government looking?
The West.
To the West. On the methane abatement technology, which is quite it should be a headline in our newspapers. It is not. Yet, the Americas, United Nations, has seen the potential in our product, that we are able to eliminate methane gas from decomposition. What do you have now? We will be looking for technology that will come from the West at an exorbitant price, a machine that is said to be able to pull out carbon from the environment. Don't pull out carbon. That's a plant job. Methane gas is the problem. We have a way of eliminating it. I showed you a certificate issued by an international jurist who actually identified that technology as the most mass deployable. It can be deployed anywhere in the country within a week if it was required, anywhere in the world. But nobody will talk about it because this is based on nature, and nature is not patentable. If you can't patent something, you can't call for those royalties. So most of the European, the Western countries or the developed countries don't want technologies that are not patentable or that are not lab-made. Yeah? They want something that you can claim, oh, we are the only guys who can do electric cars. What if a technology is made free to people? Like anybody in Mukuru kwa Jenga can learn that system, do it. Anybody in another town in Tanzania or the Americas would do it. But and that's the other part of the failure of Sharm El-Sheikh. We allowed the corporates to run the show. Corporates will never let something free happen. I don't know whether Amos, you encountered what was called World Space. There was a radio receiver called World Space Receiver. It was a free to air, free to receive. You could receive email on that handset. You could receive data. You could receive CNN. You could receive TVs from all over the world, BBC, whatever. It was free. What did you do? What happens? It was not supported. Because there was no, the commercial part, the owner of the project had actually sidestepped the commercial part where we want to make money, and so it actually failed on that aspect only. The same with our technology, it will not fly because it does not make some corporates which have hosted guys from America who wanted to buy the technology. But then I said, what will ever come from Africa if not this? Yeah.
Wow. I think we can discuss the whole day, but I want just briefly, maybe for like a few seconds, you can give us your parting shot, Amos, about the whole discussion and the whole issue of COP27, as we call it a day.
Yeah, just a quick one is that Omar mentioned that we had about 380-something delegates from Kenya. I think this is enough capacity to be able to influence these processes. What needs to be done is early planning. We need to engage everyone. Media was there, of course, complementing the work that was being done by negotiators, complementing the work that was being done by activists. You were taking out the message and outside track influencing the whole process. I think if we can start earlier engagements among various actors so that by the time we are getting to the COP, everyone is prepared. Media knows the kind of narrative that we are pushing.
Yes, sure.
Negotiators know the interests of Africa. Everyone, the activists know, and they are in sync. I think we will start influencing these processes. organization is very important. But we need to start organizing from home.
Yeah.
Africa needs to put its acts together
Yeah.
if we are to make the difference.
Wow. Awesome. Daniel, finishing.
Thank you.
quote.
The work I've done on climate change, starting from the hydrogen fuel concept,
Yes.
the methane abatement needs to go out there. That's why I thought COP27 would have offered Kenya an opportunity, not myself, Kenya, an opportunity to boast that we have actually cracked the most difficult part of energy, which is hydrogen. Hydrogen is thought to be one of the cheapest and safest in terms of environmental is very safe because the byproduct is water. When you come to methane gas abatement, we actually even stretching the horizon from just doing wastewater management or waste in general to actually incorporating our product, eco-treat waste digester, into animal feeds that actually stop animal from actually belching methane gas. It's something I wouldn't want to be the one to champion. I would wish the government would take this and run with it because after all, even if we did have several patents on the same and we were not able to deploy it ourselves, it would also mean that next drought that is coming in 2 years, and it has to be there will be a drought in 2024, 2025. It will still find us in the same situation we were this year, where we were not able to feed ourselves. So if we are able to deploy technologies now that can help us change the trend on climate change, reverse the 1.5 degrees. For last year, it's actually almost going to 4 degrees. What we had the last few months was indicative of not 1.5 degrees increase, but 4 plus. But the funny thing with the environment or the scientists is that we take the average. So we take the average temperature of the world, and like they say, scientists say that if you have head in the fridge and a feet in the oven, you are doing okay because the average is fair enough. So you will not, you still be scientifically you are okay. Currently, Africa is in the oven.
In the oven, yes.
Europe is in the fridge.
In the fridge.
But when you take the average, it looks like we are okay. So we need the world to know that it's even the issue of reparations that shouldn't come in first. If the house is on fire, put out the fire, then later on I can talk about how much you owed me or but in the initial, right now the conversation should not be about how technologies will be deployed for commercial purpose, how investment will be directed to the south. The issue now is how do we reduce the carbon in the environment, and if it's by planting dengue, let's plant dengue every inch of the world. If it is able to absorb enough of that carbon in the environment, then we can now sit down in the table and ask, from here going forward, how are we going to reduce carbon emissions? And if it requires that he stops extracting fossil fuels, and instead we supply them with geothermal, because we can do geothermal from the whole of Rift Valley from Mozambique to Israel. It's a geothermal potential area. If we did every other 3 kilometers or 30 kilometers a geothermal system, and then we put a good distribution line to Europe, then we would stop them from using gas to warm their houses, because we don't want them to die also of cold. We want them to warm their houses, but not with fossil fuels. They can use electricity from our side. And if we find that transporting electricity from Kenya to all the way to Europe, the losses along the channel is too high, let's do hydrogen pipeline. Let them make their electricity from the other end after you have transported hydrogen generated from solar on this other side. That's the kind of reasoning that we need to encourage in the next COP, But if the COP is based on tourism for our executives and nice photography sites, and I'm not saying it, but that we will have lost
Yes.
the focus
Yes.
that surrounds our survival. Because here it's not. There's a time when things are so serious, you actually even don't care who is helping you put out fire in your house. It could be your enemy.
It could be even dirty water.
Yeah, you could even use
As
that
long
water
as it's
to
water.
put out the fire.
Yes.
So if we keep on now doing those papers on the best way to do transfer of technology to Africa and make a profit for companies in Europe, so there will be a time when money will not be of any use. We saw it during COVID. Money didn't help people.
Yeah.
So you imagine COVID was a continuous drought, like we have had in the last 6 months. Money wouldn't buy anything because even the neighbor didn't have anything to sell to you. So can we change our minds, focus on survival now for the whole world, and then later on we can go back to our commercial settings.
Okay. Wonderful. Man, you guys can speak about this the whole day because I love the passion. I actually, Daniel, you've opened my mind today on what Africa can do to the Europe instead of Africa waiting for Europe to. And then that's where we have a challenge, because us in Africa many times we feel, what can they do for us? Time has come for us to think, what can we do for them? And we have the resources, we have everything in Africa which can help us to do that. Gentlemen, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Amos, for finding time. Of course, I know we disrupted your program, but of course, it is necessary to talk about these things any day, anytime. Thank you so much, Mr. Wanjuki, for finding time to speak to us. Of course, the conversation continues because we want to make sure that these discussions about our economies, about our climate in Africa, is told and spoken about in every part of this continent, because Africa is where we belong and this is our continent. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful discussion on the issues affecting the continent of Africa, and more so on the just concluded COP27. We were trying to see, was it a success? Was it a failure? We've heard from our wonderful guests whom we had in studio today. There's Amos Wemanya from PowerShift Africa and Daniel Wanjuki from EcoSafe Africa, and our friend all the way from Mombasa, Omar El Mawi, who had to step out for another engagement. But from our desk, Eco Climate Platform, this is where we're discussing matters Africa and for Africa, because climate is here with us and we must do something about it. See you next time. My name is Dan Kaburu. This was our wonderful show on environment for Africa. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.